The sun had barely begun its climb over the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across the rugged desert plains. In the early light, the land seemed almost alive, each rock and scrub whispering ancient secrets. From the distance, a lone figure moved with a deliberate grace, a silhouette carved by the soft dawn. He was an Apache warrior, his presence commanding even in silence, and by his side prowled a magnificent dog, large as a wolf, with fur as dark as midnight and eyes that glimmered with uncanny intelligence. The dog was not merely a companion. It was an extension of the warrior's spirit, a guardian of both flesh and soul. The warrior's name was Nayeli, meaning I love you in the old tongue, a name that carried both strength and tenderness. His life had been carved from the harshness of the desert and the traditions of his people. From childhood, he had been trained to survive where others would falter, to read the subtle signs of the earth, to track the wind as it carried whispers from distant valleys, and to move silently where prey and danger alike lurked. Yet it was not only his physical skill that set him apart. Nayeli possessed an innate connection to the unseen world. He could sense spirits in the breeze, hear the faintest whispers of the ancestors, and understand the language of the land itself. And always the dog, his constant companion, was there, attuned to the same ethereal currents, acting as both protector and guide. The dog's senses were remarkable. While Nayeli's eyes scanned the horizon, the dog's nose picked up scents carried across miles of dry sand. Its ears twitched at the faintest rustle of wind through sagebrush. Together, they formed a unit, a living bond that transcended words. Warriors of his tribe often spoke of the sacredness of such a partnership. It was said that the spirits themselves blessed the man who could trust another creature with his life so completely. Nayeli had earned that trust through years of shared trials and unspoken loyalty. On this morning, Nayeli was not merely wandering. His heart carried the weight of a prophecy, a vision imparted by the elders of his tribe in the candlelit stillness of their ceremonial lodge. They had spoken of a great trial, one that would test the limits of courage, faith, and endurance. And within that trial, there was a promise, one of love, destiny, and a bond that would defy even the harshest desert. Nayeli did not fully understand the shape of what was to come, but he knew the path he walked was guided by forces older than any living memory. Every step he took across the cracked earth felt purposeful, as if the desert itself bent slightly to support his journey. The wind carried the faint aroma of distant sage, and the warmth of the rising sun kissed his weathered skin. The landscape was harsh yet beautiful in its raw, unforgiving manner. There was a certain rhythm to the land, a pulse that Nayeli had learned to follow. Rocks became landmarks, winds became guides, and the cries of distant birds marked both danger and safety. In this wilderness, he was at once hunter and guardian, alive to every sense, attuned to every subtle vibration in the sand beneath his feet. Yet there was more than survival in his eyes. There was an unspoken yearning. Beneath the warrior's stoicism lay a heart that longed for companionship, a soul ready to meet the other half of a destiny foretold. The elder's prophecy had hinted at a promise, a union that would transcend even the trials of the desert. Nayeli had no doubt it awaited him somewhere beyond the dunes and rocky outcrops. Until that meeting, he moved with patience, allowing the desert to teach him, the dog to guide him, and the spirits to whisper truths he had not yet fully grasped. As the morning deepened, Nayeli's shadow stretched long across the sand, paralleling the shadow of his faithful dog. Together, they were more than man and beast. They were a single force of instinct, wisdom, and loyalty, prepared for whatever destiny the desert held. And unknown to both, the desert had already begun to stir, shifting sands as though preparing for the moment when prophecy would become reality. The desert seemed endless, a vast expanse of sand and stone stretching beyond the horizon, shimmering in the heat of the mid-morning sun. Nayeli and his dog moved steadily, their steps deliberate, their senses keenly tuned to every detail of the harsh terrain. Though the wind was warm, it carried with it the scent of distant dangers, dried bones, scorched earth, and the faint, almost imperceptible trace of human passage. The desert was unforgiving, and yet to Nayeli it felt alive, as if it recognized his presence and tested his resolve at every step. He had been warned by the elders of his tribe. This journey would not be merely physical, but spiritual. The prophecy that had guided him was precise in its vagueness. He was to follow the whispers of the wind, to trust the instincts of his dog, and to remain unwavering in the face of trials. Nayeli's mind remained focused, though a quiet tension pulsed beneath his calm exterior. Something lay ahead, something that would test every skill he had honed since childhood. He could feel it in the way the desert seemed to shift around him, the way the sun cast shadows that danced like spirits across the dunes. The dog, ever alert, led the way across rocky ridges and through dry riverbeds. Its fur bristled slightly at distant sounds, its sharp eyes catching movement too subtle for human perception. Nayeli followed, attuned to the dog's every gesture. They had been partners for years, and their bond went beyond trust. It was almost telepathic. When the dog paused abruptly, ears erect and body tense, Nayeli instinctively crouched, scanning the horizon for threats. But there was none. Only the desert, silent and watchful, stretching toward infinity. As the hours passed, the sun climbed higher, burning the sand to a dazzling gold. The warrior felt the heat pressing against his skin, the dryness of the air stealing moisture from his body. Yet he pressed on, his resolve unwavering. Every step was guided by instinct and the whispered directions of the spirits. In the distance, dunes rose and fell like waves in a frozen ocean, each ridge hiding secrets that might either aid or hinder him. He remembered the elders' words. The desert tests the soul first, the body second. Only those who endure both shall reach what is promised. Despite the harshness of the terrain, there were moments of beauty that reminded Nayeli of the sacredness of the land. A lone hawk circled high above, its cry echoing across the plains. Small clusters of wild desert flowers clung to life in the cracks between rocks, their colors vivid against the monotony of sand and stone. The warrior paused briefly to admire them, kneeling to touch the petals and give thanks to the spirits for these small miracles. Even in a place of desolation, life found a way, and so did hope. Yet there was an underlying tension, a sense that the desert itself was holding its breath. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying with it a scent unfamiliar and haunting. Nayeli sniffed the air, catching the faint tang of iron and something else, something human. His heart quickened. The dog growled softly, ears swiveling toward the scent, its body low and tense. They were close. Nayeli's mind raced, considering every possibility. Bandits? Travelers in distress? Or perhaps, as the elder's prophecy hinted, the fated encounter he had been preparing for all his life. The dunes ahead rose higher, their peaks catching the sunlight like molten gold. Nayeli squinted into the distance, feeling a pull he could not explain, a magnetic tug that seemed to draw him forward. The dog pressed closer to his side, its eyes locking onto the same horizon, signaling that it too sensed the significance of what lay ahead. There was no hesitation now, only a focused determination, a silent agreement between man and beast to face whatever awaited together. As they began their final ascent toward the highest dune, the shadows behind them stretched long and distorted, as though the desert itself were stretching its arms to guide or warn them. Nayeli adjusted the strap of his quiver, tightened his grip on the spear, and allowed his thoughts to drift briefly to the prophecy. The promise of destiny was near. He could feel it. And with each step, the desert seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. And then, as they crested the ridge, the world shifted. A faint movement in the dust, a barely perceptible figure sprawled across the sands. Nayeli froze, instincts sharpening. The journey had led him here. Whatever awaited was no longer a vision or a whisper. It was real. The desert air was heavy with heat, yet a sudden chill ran down Nayeli's spine. The moment his eyes fell upon the figure ahead, the world seemed to narrow, as if the vast expanse of sand and stone had compressed around them. A woman lay motionless, on the ground, half buried in dust, her clothing torn and stained, her hair matted with sand. The sight was jarring, a delicate, fragile presence in the unforgiving wilderness. Nayeli's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his knife, but his heart whispered something far more urgent than caution. She was alive, and she needed him. The dog growled softly, low and warning, yet it did not advance aggressively. Instead, it circled the woman, its keen senses examining the scene. There was no immediate threat, only the faint, erratic pulse of a life hanging by a thread. Nayeli knelt beside her, letting his eyes scan for injuries. Dust covered much of her skin, but he could see the faint marks of blood and bruises, the evidence of a struggle, and the telltale signs of exhaustion and dehydration. Every instinct he had honed in the harshest terrains screamed that this was a moment of profound importance. He brushed the sand from her face and shoulders, careful not to jostle her fragile body. Her breathing was shallow, each inhale a labored effort. But it was there, a stubborn flicker of life that refused to extinguish. Nayeli tore a strip of cloth from his tunic, dampened it with water from his flask, and pressed it gently to her lips, urging her to drink. At first she resisted, coughing and sputtering, but the life-giving water slowly revived her. The dog nudged her hand, its warm breath against her cheek, providing a strange comfort, a silent reassurance that she was not alone. As the woman's eyes fluttered open, they met Nayeli's gaze. Fear and confusion swirled within them, but there was also a flicker of recognition, an inexplicable, haunting familiarity. She tried to speak, but her voice was a hoarse whisper. "Water, please," she croaked. Nayeli offered another sip, and with a trembling hand she accepted it, her fingers brushing his. The touch was fleeting, yet it carried the weight of destiny. He studied her more closely now. Her skin, bronzed by the sun, bore subtle marks of a journey filled with hardship. Her pendant, half buried in the sand beside her, caught the sunlight. Small, intricate piece of silver shaped like an eagle in flight. Something stirred deep within Nayeli, a memory or a vision from the elder's prophecy that had guided him across the desert. His heart began to race. The elders had spoken of a promised bride, one he would find not in comfort or safety, but in the trials of the wilderness, a woman whose arrival would signify the fulfillment of a sacred bond. Could this fragile, dust-covered figure be her? The dog growled softly again, not in anger, but as if acknowledging the truth that Nayeli was only beginning to comprehend. The warrior's hands moved instinctively, lifting her gently and cradling her against his chest. Every movement was careful, deliberate, mindful of the delicate life he now held in his arms. He whispered reassurances, though he knew she could barely comprehend them. "You are safe now. You will live. I will see to it." The desert around them seemed to respond, the wind shifting as if carrying approval from unseen spirits. Nayeli scanned the horizon for shelter, his eyes falling on a small outcropping of rocks that could shield them from the relentless sun. He laid her down carefully, the dog taking its position beside her, ears alert and body tense. There was a silent understanding between the three of them. The desert was harsh, but together they could endure. As she lay there, regaining strength slowly, Nayeli could not shake the sense of inevitability that gripped him. This was more than a chance encounter. The prophecy had led him here, and in the quiet beating of her heart, he sensed the threads of fate weaving a story that would forever bind their lives. The warrior dog's gaze met his, and in that instant Nayeli knew. The journey was far from over, but he had found the one he had been destined to protect. Nayeli's hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility. The woman's life hung precariously between the unforgiving heat of the desert and the slow, steady care he could provide. He knew that without immediate action, the fragile spark of life he now held could be extinguished forever. The dog nudged her gently, sensing the urgency as if urging Nayeli to act quickly. The warrior's instincts surged, honed by years of survival and countless battles. But this was unlike any challenge he had faced before. He was not fighting an enemy, but time itself. The first priority was water. Nayeli tore the remaining, cloth from his tunic and fashioned a makeshift bandage for her wounds, though most of them were minor abrasions and bruises caused by her collapse. The deeper cuts he carefully cleaned with the last of the water he carried, murmuring prayers to the spirits for guidance and protection. The woman's eyes fluttered as he worked, pain and exhaustion mirrored in her gaze. Yet there was a faint recognition in her eyes as she watched him, as though some part of her already understood that this stranger, this warrior and his dog, were not ordinary beings. They were her salvation. Once her wounds were stabilized, Naili needed to move her to a safer place. The desert sun was merciless, and the rocky outcropping in the distance promised shade and protection. He lifted her gently, cradling her against his chest, careful not to jostle her fragile body. The dog ran ahead, scouting the path, alert to any hidden dangers, snakes, scorpions, or other predators that could exploit the moment. Together they moved with a quiet urgency, each step measured yet swift, the sand soft beneath their feet and the air thick with the heat of noon. As they approached the rocks, Naili set her down carefully, adjusting her position so she could rest comfortably against the cool stone. He shaded her from the sun with his cloak, the dog lying close, protective and watchful. The woman's breathing, once shallow and uneven, began to stabilize, though her body remained weak. Naili poured the last of his water into her hands, helping her drink slowly. The life-giving liquid revived her faintly, and she gave a weak, grateful smile that stirred something deep in Naili's chest, a premonition that fate had delivered her into his care for a reason. Her voice came then, fragile and barely audible. "Thank you," she whispered, her words carried on a thread of sound almost lost to the desert wind. Naili shook his head gently. "Do not speak yet. Conserve your strength. You are safe now. You will not die here." The dog growled softly in agreement, pressing its head against her knees in a protective gesture. There was an unspoken understanding in this small camp of three. They were bound together by something far greater than circumstance. Naili examined the pendant on her chest again, the small silver eagle glinting faintly in the sunlight. Something about it seemed to resonate with the visions he had received from the elders. He had been searching for this moment, this woman, across miles of harsh terrain and unforgiving desert. And now that she was here, lying before him, fragile yet alive, he understood the weight of the prophecy. She was not merely someone to be rescued. She was the one he had been destined to find, the promised bride of whom the elders had spoken. He allowed himself a moment to study her features more closely, taking in the contours of her face, the determination hidden behind her exhaustion, and the subtle spark of life that refused to fade. Her eyes, once half closed in despair, now met his with a quiet intensity, as if recognizing the unspoken truth between them. Naili felt a surge of both reverence and determination. He would see her through the desert, protect her from harm, and fulfill the promise that fate had etched into their lives. With the dog at his side and the woman slowly regaining strength, Naili prepared to continue their journey. The desert was still merciless, the sun relentless, but now they faced it together. The warrior understood that this rescue was only the beginning, the first step in a path that would test their courage, resilience, and the bond that destiny had forged. And as he lifted his head toward the horizon, the shadows stretching across the dunes, he felt a deep certainty. They would endure, and the promise of the prophecy would not be denied. By the time the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, the desert's harsh glare softened into a muted amber, casting long, trembling shadows across the sand. The woman lay propped against the rocky outcrop, her breathing steadier now, though still fragile. Naili remained close, his eyes scanning the horizon while the dog sat alert, ears twitching at every whisper of the wind. For a long while, neither spoke. The silence was comfortable, filled only with the faint hum of the desert and the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. Finally she stirred, lifting her head with an effort that sent strands of dusty hair falling across her face. Her voice was weak, rasping, as if it had not been used in days. I don't know how I survived," she admitted, eyes wide with disbelief and gratitude. Naeli inclined his head, offering her water again. The desert can be merciless, he said gently, but it can also guide those who listen. You are alive because you followed your path, and because fate allowed me to find you. Her gaze lingered on him, a mixture of awe and confusion. Fate, she repeated, her voice almost a whisper. I had a dream, a vision. I was told I must travel to a distant village to a man who would protect me, but I did not know his face. I thought it was only a dream, nothing more. Until now. Her hand trembled as she lifted it to touch the silver eagle pendant that had fallen from her neck and into the sand when she collapsed. I found it in the dream, too. I thought it was a symbol, a warning. But now, her voice faltered, trailing off as she looked at Naeli with an intensity that seemed to pierce the desert air. Naeli felt his heart tighten. The elder's prophecy had spoken of a woman he would find, one whose journey would mirror the trials of the land, whose spirit was intertwined with his own. The details had been vague, shrouded in metaphor, yet every word he had received now resonated with the woman before him. The pendant in her hand, the story of her vision, the peril she had survived, it was all connected, threads woven by the unseen hand of destiny. Your dream, Naeli said slowly. It brought you here, to me. To survive the desert, one must trust the guidance of the spirits and the instincts of those who walk with you. You have done both. That is why you are here now. He paused, searching her eyes for a sign that she understood, that she sensed the weight of what he was saying. Slowly, she nodded, a flicker of comprehension dawning. I remember fragments, she admitted, faces I have never seen, words I did not understand, yet I felt them as if they belonged to me. Her voice faltered again, but there was a new determination beneath the weakness. And now, I am here, with you. She looked at the dog, then back at Naeli. He guided me, didn't he? She said softly, a note of wonder in her tone. Naeli nodded. He is more than a companion. He senses what the eye cannot see, what the heart cannot yet comprehend. He guided us both to this moment. The woman's eyes glistened with a mix of relief and awe, and she reached out tentatively, touching Naeli's arm. I don't know your name, or who you truly are, but I feel as though I have known you forever. Naeli's chest tightened. He had felt the same connection the moment he first saw her lying in the dust, a bond beyond understanding, deeper than instinct or reason. He inclined his head solemnly. I am Naeli, and you are the one the spirits have promised, the one I have sought across the desert. You are my bride, as the elders foretold. The words hung in the desert air, weighty and sacred. She blinked, absorbing them slowly, her trembling hand still resting against his arm. The wind shifted, stirring sand at their feet, carrying a faint, almost musical whisper as if the desert itself approved of the union being recognized. For the first time in days, the woman allowed herself to exhale fully, her body relaxing as a sense of inevitability settled over her. The dog, sensing the change, wagged its tail slightly, its ears perking with an alertness that mirrored Naeli's own. Together, the three of them, the warrior, the woman, and the loyal dog, sat in silence, bound by survival, trust, and the unspoken promise that their paths were forever intertwined. The desert, harsh and vast, had tested them, but it had also delivered them to each other. And in that quiet, amber-lit moment, the first threads of destiny began to weave their shared story. The sun dipped lower, casting long, golden shadows across the desert floor, and a quiet stillness settled over the rocky outcrop. Naeli sat close to the woman, watching her slowly sip water from his flask. Her breathing had stabilized, and though she remained fragile, there was a spark of life, and something deeper, something stirring within her gaze. As he observed her, a realization began to crystallize in his mind, one that made his heart beat faster with both awe and certainty. He reached out and picked up the silver eagle pendant that had fallen into the sand earlier, turning it slowly between his fingers. The craftsmanship was exquisite, intricate, and familiar. Too familiar. Nayeli's mind raced back to the visions imparted by the elders of his tribe. In the candlelit lodge, they had spoken of a woman whose arrival would fulfill a sacred promise, whose symbol would be the eagle in flight. They had said her presence would be unmistakable, marked by signs both seen and unseen. And now, as he held the pendant and looked at her, everything aligned, the dream, the prophecy, the fragile figure before him. His breath caught. You are the one," he whispered, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. The woman looked up at him, confusion and hope mingling in her eyes. "The one?" she echoed softly. Nayeli nodded, unable to conceal the awe in his expression. The elders spoke of a bride foretold, a woman who would come not by chance but by destiny. Every step of your journey, every trial you have endured, it led you to this moment, to me. You are the one I have been promised, the woman of the prophecy. The woman's fingers instinctively clutched the pendant to her chest, her eyes widening as understanding began to dawn. Fragments of her own dream, pieces she had dismissed as illusions, now fell into place. Faces she had never seen, words she had not understood, they had all pointed to this moment. She felt it deep within her, a recognition that transcended logic or memory. Nayeli's words resonated, as if echoing a truth she had always known, but could not yet name. The dog, ever watchful, seemed to sense the shift in the air. Its low growl softened into a gentle rumble of contentment, and it pressed close to both of them, as if acknowledging that the promise spoken of in prophecy was now being realized. Nayeli's eyes met the dog's, and a silent communication passed between them, a shared understanding that destiny had not erred, that the bond between man and woman, warrior and bride, was now undeniable. The desert around them seemed to hum, with a subtle energy, a vibration that Nayeli felt in his bones. The wind carried a faint whisper, as if the spirits themselves had leaned close to witness the recognition of their sacred plan. Even the rocks and sand appeared to shimmer in approval, a silent celebration of the union about to begin. Nayeli lowered the pendant carefully, pressing it into the woman's hand. "It has chosen you," he said softly. "And by that choice the promise is fulfilled. You are not merely here by chance. You are here because you were always meant to be." Tears welled in the woman's eyes, a mixture of relief, awe, and the unshakable certainty of fate. She nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. I understand now. I was searching for this, for you, for this purpose." Nayeli's heart ached with the weight and beauty of her words. It was not just her survival that mattered. It was the acknowledgement that destiny had guided them both, had carved their paths through the harshness of the desert to meet at this exact intersection of time and purpose. He extended his hand to her, a gesture both protective and reverent. "We are bound now," he said, his voice steady, carrying the solemnity of the promise. "By the spirits, by the desert, and by the path that led us here." She placed her, hand in his, trembling slightly but with an unspoken strength that mirrored his own. The dog, sensing the finality of recognition, nudged her gently, as if to seal the bond in its own way. In that moment, under the softening light of the desert sun, Nayeli knew that the prophecy was no longer just words spoken by elders in a lodge. It was alive, tangible, and present in the woman before him. The promised bride was no longer a vision, she was real, and the warrior's destiny, intertwined with hers, had finally come into sharp, undeniable focus. The desert had delivered, and their lives were forever changed. The desert night descended quietly, cooling the sand and casting a blanket of stars across the sky. Nayeli had built a small shelter using rocks and his cloak to shield the woman from the wind and chill. The dog curled nearby, alert but relaxed, keeping watch as the warrior tended to her. She lay on a bed of soft cloths he had gathered, her body exhausted but slowly regaining warmth and strength. The flickering light of a small fire cast shadows across her face, highlighting the pale flush returning to her cheeks. Nayeli knelt beside her, examining the bruises and cuts with care. He applied herbal poultices prepared from dried sage and desert plants, rubbing them gently into her skin. The scents of the herbs mingled with the dry air, soothing both body and spirit. Each movement was deliberate, slow, and patient, for he knew that healing required not just skill but understanding. Her eyes followed his hands, filled with trust and a faint awe. "You've saved me," she whispered, voice hoarse but steadying. Nayeli shook his head. "No," he replied softly. "The spirits guided me. They saved you. I merely followed their will." She attempted a weak smile, but it quickly faded as fatigue overtook her again. Nayeli adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, ensuring she was warm. The dog rested its head near her feet, eyes half closed but attentive to every sound. Together, the three of them formed a quiet circle of safety in the vast, unforgiving desert. In that space, the harshness of the outside world seemed to retreat, leaving only trust, care, and an unspoken bond forming between them. Hours passed in quiet work and whispered conversation. Nayeli encouraged her to drink water in small sips, to eat a few bites of dried fruit he had carried, and to rest as much as possible. Slowly, the color returned to her cheeks, her breathing became steadier, and her eyes began to shine with renewed life. Each moment of progress was a small victory, a triumph over the desert and its trials. Nayeli's heart lifted with each sign of recovery, a quiet pride mingling with relief. As the night deepened, she finally found her voice. "I remember fragments of my journey," she said, her gaze distant. "Bandits. A collapse. I thought I would die in the dust. But then I saw you and the dog. I don't understand how, but I knew I could trust you." Nayeli met her eyes, the firelight reflecting a solemn certainty in his gaze. "Trust is earned, but sometimes it is also given by destiny. You were meant to survive to reach me. Now that you are here, we will face the desert together, not as strangers, but as bound by purpose and promise." She reached out tentatively, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "I feel it too," she admitted softly, "as though I have known you all my life." Nayeli allowed himself a rare moment of vulnerability, placing his hand over hers. "The spirits have guided us both. Your strength is returning, and soon we will continue our journey. But for now, rest. Let your body and spirit heal." The dog shifted closer, nuzzling her hand as if to affirm Nayeli's words. The warrior smiled faintly, understanding that even the dog recognized the sacredness of their connection. In that simple, quiet act, a deeper bond was forged, not just between man and woman, but with the loyal creature who had guided them both to this moment. Night wore on, and the desert's sounds changed. The wind whispered softly over the dunes, carrying a faint harmony that seemed almost musical. The stars above twinkled as if watching over them, distant witnesses to the quiet miracle unfolding in the shelter. Nayeli sat in vigilant silence, listening to the soft rise and fall of her breath, feeling the steady presence of the dog beside him, and sensing the slow but undeniable strength returning to the woman. By the time the moon rose high, silver and luminous over the desert, she stirred once more, opening her eyes fully. "I feel stronger," she said, her voice steady and more confident. Nayeli inclined his head, a proud but gentle smile gracing his features. "Good, we have much ahead of us. The desert is not yet finished with its trials, but together we are ready." In that moment, the warrior, the woman, and the dog shared a profound silence. The desert had tested them, but it had also healed them, strengthened them, and deepened the bonds of trust and destiny that now bound their lives. And beneath the vast starlit sky, the first whispers of hope and purpose stirred, heralding the journey yet to come. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and rose. Nayeli helped the woman sit up, her strength returning more fully now, though she still leaned on him for support. The dog stood beside them, alert and watchful, sensing the subtle shifts in the air as if aware that today held great significance. Nayeli's gaze swept over the vast expanse of sand and rock before them, then returned to her. It was time to speak, not of survival, but of purpose. "You have regained your strength," Nayeli began, his voice calm but filled with gravity. "And now you must understand why you were brought here, why fate guided you across the desert, and why we survived when others would not." The woman looked at him, Curiosity mingled with apprehension and nodded. I feel it, she admitted softly, that this meeting is not by chance, but I do not yet understand. Nayeli reached for the pendant around her neck, the silver eagle glinting in the early sunlight. This, he said, holding it carefully between his fingers, is not merely jewelry. It is a sign of prophecy. The elders of my tribe spoke of a woman whose path would cross with mine, a woman marked by the eagle, whose arrival would fulfill a sacred promise. She would endure trials of desert, wind, and sun, guided not only by her own spirit but by the unseen forces of the spirits. That woman is you. The woman's eyes widened and she clasped the pendant to her chest. Memories of her dream, the vague faces, the warnings, the call to travel across a perilous land, all returned with startling clarity. It was true, she whispered. All of it. I thought it was just a dream, a vision to frighten me. But I see now. It was preparation. It led me to you. Her voice trembled with awe and a flicker of fear lingered beneath the realization. But what does it mean? What is this promise? Nayeli's expression softened, a mixture of reverence and determination. The promise is that our lives are bound together, he explained. Not only by destiny but by purpose. The elders said that the woman would not simply be found. She would be tested, shaped by survival in the elements, until she could stand beside the warrior, not as a follower but as an equal, a companion and a guide. That is why the spirits led us here, to prepare us both for what lies ahead. The woman took a slow breath, letting his words sink in. So, we are meant to journey together, she murmured, her fingers brushing the pendant. Not just to survive the desert, but to fulfill something greater. Nayeli nodded. Yes, there are trials yet to come. Dangers not just of the land, but of men who would seek to harm what we are meant to protect. But together, we are stronger. You are no longer alone, and neither am I. The dog padded closer, nudging the woman's hand with its nose as if affirming the truth of Nayeli's words. She smiled faintly, brushing its fur with a gentle touch. And he was part of this path all along, she said, glancing at the loyal creature. Nayeli's lips curved into a small, proud smile. He is more than a companion. He is a guardian of the bond, a guide who helped us find each other. Every step, every instinct has led us here. For a moment, they sat in silence, letting the weight of destiny settle around them. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a place of beauty and peril, of trials and guidance. Nayeli took the woman's hand in his, their fingers intertwining naturally, firmly, as if acknowledging the unspoken understanding between them. We will face the desert together, he said softly, and we will endure whatever the spirits demand. But we will do it as one. That is the destiny that has chosen us both. She met his gaze, a newfound confidence and clarity shining in her eyes. Then I will not fear the journey, she said. I will walk with you, and together we will honor the promise. Nayeli nodded, feeling the deep, sacred truth of her words resonate within him. The dog barked softly, almost in agreement, before settling back at their feet. The desert wind swept over them, carrying the faint scent of sage and the promise of a new day. In that quiet, radiant moment, the warrior, the woman, and the loyal dog recognized their shared destiny fully. The prophecy was no longer a distant vision. It was alive, palpable, and guiding their path forward. Whatever trials awaited them, they would face them as one, bound by trust, courage, and the sacred promise that had brought them together. The desert morning was crisp, the air carrying the faint scent of distant sage and sun-warmed stone. Nayeli helped the woman to her feet, her steps unsteady but stronger than the day before. The dog trotted alongside them, alert and ready, ears twitching at every sound. The whisper of the wind, the rustle of sand, the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. Together they began the next leg of their journey, the vast dunes stretching endlessly before them, testing both endurance and spirit. The woman adjusted the cloak around her shoulders, glancing at Nayeli with a mixture of gratitude and determination. I never realized the desert could feel so alive, she said, her voice steadying with confidence. Every sound, every shadow. It seems to watch us. Nayeli nodded. It does, but you have learned quickly. You move with awareness now, not just by sight, but by instinct, by spirit. That is what the desert teaches those who survive it. Hours passed, each step over shifting sand reinforcing their bond. At one point, a sudden gust of wind swept across the dunes, carrying fine grains of sand that stung like tiny needles against their skin. Nayeli immediately dropped to shield her, using his body and cloak to create a barrier. The dog pressed close, growling softly, ears flat against its head as the storm whipped around them. When the wind finally eased, the woman looked up at Nayeli, eyes wide with awe. You protected me without thinking," she whispered. "It's as though you can anticipate danger before it comes." Nayeli smiled faintly, brushing the sand from her cloak. "We move as one now," he said. "The desert teaches us to trust instincts, and instincts are strongest when we trust each other. You are learning to read the signs. Together, we are stronger." She nodded slowly, a new confidence settling in her expression. Every challenge seemed to reinforce not only their survival skills, but their trust in one another. As they continued, they came upon a narrow canyon, the walls steep and jagged. A sudden screech echoed through the rock formations, a band of scavenger birds circling overhead. The woman froze, her first instinct to panic, but Nayeli took her hand firmly. "Steady," he instructed. "We are not alone. Observe, plan, and act. The desert rewards those who move with purpose." She followed his lead, crouching low and moving in measured steps. The dog darted ahead, scouting the safest path through the canyon. Every instinct, every decision was a shared effort, a partnership forged in necessity and trust. By the time they emerged from the canyon, the woman was breathing heavily, but her face held a proud smile. "I did it," she said softly, glancing at Nayeli. "I didn't panic, I moved with you." Nayeli's heart swelled with quiet pride. "You did more than survive," he said. "You learned. You adapted. That is what the journey requires. And that is why we are bound not just by destiny, but by shared purpose and understanding." The day wore on, and as they made camp near a cluster of rocks that provided shade and water, a new sense of camaraderie settled over them. The woman tended to the dog, brushing the sand from its fur, while Nayeli prepared a simple meal from dried fruit and water. Laughter, soft and tentative at first, began to ripple through their small camp. The tension of survival eased into the warmth of companionship, the silent acknowledgement that they were no longer strangers navigating the desert alone. As night fell, the stars twinkled brilliantly over the dunes, mirrored in the woman's eyes as she gazed at them. "I feel different," she said, voice soft with wonder. "I am stronger, braver, not just because of you, but because I have had to trust myself. And trust you." Nayeli reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "And that is the bond we will carry through the desert," he said. "It is forged not in comfort but in challenge. Each step, each trial strengthens it. Together nothing can break it." The dog curled between them, its presence a quiet reminder of loyalty, guidance, and instinct. In that moment, warrior, woman, and guardian shared more than shelter. They shared understanding, trust, and the deep unspoken connection that comes from facing adversity side by side. The desert, harsh and relentless, had become their proving ground, and through it, their bond had deepened into something unshakable. The sun rose over the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the desert as Nayeli, the woman, and the dog began the final stretch of their journey. The dunes had given way to rocky plains, the air cooler and tinged with the scent of distant water and vegetation. Their footsteps fell in rhythm, each stride a testament to endurance, trust, and the bond they had forged. The woman walked with confidence now, her strength fully restored, and Nayeli felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The desert had tested them, shaped them, and ultimately delivered them to the moment they had been destined for. As they approached the outskirts of Nayeli's village, the familiar sounds of life, the calls of hunters, the laughter of children, the low hum of daily work, welcomed them. For a moment the woman hesitated, overwhelmed by the reality of civilization after so many days in the desert. Nayeli placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "Do not fear," he said. "The journey has prepared us. Today the promise is honored, and the prophecy fulfilled." The dog barked softly, a cheerful, affirming sound, as if echoing Nayeli's words. The villagers spotted them first, a mixture of curiosity and awe in their eyes. Mothers pulled children close, elders stepped forward, and hunters set aside their work, all drawn to the sight of the warrior returning with a woman they did not yet recognize. Nayeli lifted his chin, standing tall, the dog at his side as he guided her forward. "She is the one foretold in prophecy," he announced to those who gathered. "The one the spirits promised would come. the bride chosen by destiny to walk beside me. Gasps of astonishment and murmurs of reverence spread through the crowd. The elders who had first shared the prophecy stepped forward, their eyes gleaming with recognition and pride. "It is true," one said, his voice strong despite his age. "The promise has been fulfilled. The spirits have guided her to us, and she is as the vision foretold." Nayeli's eyes met hers, and she nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. Her journey through danger, through exhaustion and fear, had led her here, to a place of honor, recognition, and sacred bond. The villagers welcomed them warmly, offering water, food, and shelter. Children gathered around to admire the dog who wagged its tail but remained close to Nayeli, protective and proud. The woman walked beside him, her hand lightly brushing his, feeling the shared strength of their journey and the recognition of their bond. The elders performed a quiet ceremony, blessing their union and acknowledging the fulfillment of the prophecy. They spoke of the desert, of destiny, and of the courage that had guided them both through trials that would have broken lesser spirits. As the ceremony concluded, Nayeli turned to the woman, the golden light of late afternoon reflecting in her eyes. "The desert has tested us," he said softly, "but it has also delivered us. It has forged our bond, strengthened our spirits, and led us to this moment. From now on, we walk together, as equals, as partners, as the fulfillment of the promise." She smiled, her hand finding his, fingers intertwining in a gesture that was both intimate and sacred. "And I will walk with you," she replied, "through every challenge, every joy, and every moment the spirits grant us. Our journey is only beginning." The dog barked once sharply as if approving and then settled contentedly at their feet. The village cheered, welcoming not only the warrior and his bride but the living testament of prophecy realized. Together they had endured the desert, survived its trials, and emerged stronger, bound not only by fate but by shared courage, trust, and love. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in deep reds and purples, Nayeli, the woman, and the dog stood together on a small rise overlooking the village. The wind carried the faint scent of sage and dust, whispering through the canyons and plains as if offering a benediction. The prophecy had been fulfilled, the promise honored, and the warrior, his bride, and their loyal companion looked ahead to a life guided by destiny, strength, and the enduring bond forged in the heart of the desert.